Hello, I'm the Everyday Aquarist and I have a hair algae problem. They say admitting you have a problem is the first step in overcoming that problem. So yeah, hair algae is everywhere, but actually I'm at the point where it's starting to recede. And I'm going to just show you in this video what I've been doing for the last probably 2 months to try and get to this point. Now, the first thing you have to find out is why you have the hair algae in the first place. So I'm just going to go through that, and then we're going to go through 3 or 4 tips as to how I'm getting rid of it. So as you can see, there is hair algae quite significantly in this tank here. And on this tank we've also got a fair bit of hair algae. It's very unsightly, it's all through the system, and it's been doing my head in for a couple of months. And I've been a little bit upset and maybe a little bit depressed about it because I didn't really want this to happen. I wanted this to be a shining beacon as to fish keeping and the future of my hobby, but unfortunately it hasn't gone perfectly to plan, as all things don't go perfectly to plan. But we're on the other side of it. You can see it's just everywhere, and a lot of people at this point would give up. I think a lot of people, I've read forums about fish keeping and hair algae, and they would just close everything down and move on to the next hobby, but not us. We're going to carry on and proceed. So why did it happen? The actual reason is me. It's totally my fault why I got hair algae. Numerous things happened in my life which meant I didn't have the time or the willpower to dedicate to keeping these systems as clean as they should be. And it was a kind of a cascade of different things. Firstly, it was poor maintenance. I just didn't have the time to maintain these systems as often and as well as I wanted to. I couldn't really get in here and clean them out as well as I wanted to, and then that led to a lack of water changes, and a lack of water changes means poor water quality, and I just kind of missed it. I was busy doing something else and my water quality, especially on this side, just plummeted. The alkalinity went to something like 6.2, magnesium dropped to 1100, and obviously all the micronutrients would have also vanished. And what that meant is my macroalgae just didn't grow. It stopped growing, and I was still at this point putting in nitrates and phosphates because I was kind of not in the right mindset even to just test my water. So poor water quality with the addition of lots of nitrates and phosphates leads to this horrific scene. And it's pretty much the same on this side. Same idea, lack of maintenance, adding nutrients, no water changes, and this is what you get. So if you are struggling with hair algae, how I am, the biggest thing you want to do, the first step you want to do, is test your water, because there's a good chance that your water isn't as good as you think it is. It's not just about testing the pH or whatever people seem to think is the right answer for testing water. You want to do a full, complete water test if possible. Even send it off to be tested for every single thing there is in your water. ICP testing, I think it's called. Once you've tested, you'll probably realise that there's something wrong with your aquarium water quality. Now, these are the main things that you test for in a reef tank, but this isn't the only stuff in salt water. There's lots and lots of micronutrients which we just can't test for. And that's what leads me on to the next point, which is really helping me right now, is more frequent and larger water changes than you would normally do. So what I've been doing on this system, which is really significantly helping me get through this hair algae problem, is large water changes. So this system's around 850 litres and this barrel's 250 litres. Essentially, I've been flushing this system every week with 250 litres of water, really chucking some fresh minerals into this system, and it's helped significantly. Beforehand, this Botryocladia was not growing. It was just sitting there getting covered in hair algae. Obviously there's still hair algae on it now, but there was no new growth. Essentially there is now new growth on this Botryocladia, whereas there wasn't before. And it wasn't something I could test for other than magnesium and the alkalinity, which was low, which is poor anyway. But there was obviously a micronutrient or micronutrients that was missing, which I've then replaced by doing a system flush. So So first step, I would say, is try and flush your system with some fresh salt water, good quality salt, and that may be enough on its own. Now I like to use codium, which is this macroalgae here, as an indicator of system happiness. And I always say if the codium's out, then the water quality is good. And finally, my codium has got these little green hairs on it. Now this isn't hair algae, this is what codium does when it's happy. And my codium has not done this for the last 2 months. And it's just started to do it since I've done big water changes. So that's telling me that the water quality is now good. Now that doesn't mean I can stop doing water changes now. It just means I've found out that I need to do them bigger and more frequently than I was doing. So I was probably doing a barrel once a month. Now I'm going to be doing a barrel every 2 weeks, just to keep that fresh water through the system, keep those nutrients stable. I mean, this is obvious stuff, but I just didn't have the time in my life to do it, and you can see the results. And I think it's a good show of what can go wrong, even on a large system, if you just don't do these basic maintenance tasks. So the other thing I've been doing is trying to add really fast growing macroalgae into my systems to try and outcompete the hair algae. So you can see here I've got Caulerpa racemosa, I've got Prolifera, and I've got Prolifera and racemosa in there somewhere as well. And I've been doing that purely to try and outcompete the hair algae. You can see there's hair algae in here and there's Caulerpa racemosa in here. This wasn't the plan. I wasn't planning on having racemosa everywhere, but the idea is to try and get this species established at least to a point where the hair algae won't grow as fast because the Caulerpa is soaking it up. And that's kind of the idea with any refugium. That's what you would do when you have a Cheeto reactor, or you just have Cheeto or whatever in your sump. And that's the plan for the moment. I'm just going to focus on 1 or 2 fast growing species that will make this system more stable when it starts to outcompete the hair algae. And you can kind of see it because this tub here was as bad as this tub, and in fact this tub was worse a couple of days ago. So we're getting there, aren't we? And these tubs in general are actually pretty clean. There's still a little bit of hair algae. We've got some brown algae in here as well. It might be cyano, but that's just the next step, isn't it, really? We'll deal with that in a minute. But overall, in this tub area, the hair algae is going down because my strategy is working. This tank's pretty clear. So we will get there. This is a sign that it's working. And that's what you have to do, because it's not an overnight fix. You have to fix your water quality, and then you have to make the system change to the point where the hair algae isn't favoured compared to other things. So a lot of people online say reduce nitrates, reduce phosphates, and your hair algae will go away. And to a certain degree that's true, it helps, but I find that advice is actually really bad, because in a reef system, be it in the ocean or in your fish tank, there are organisms that need to use nitrate and phosphate to grow. And a lot of these organisms are actually beneficial to a healthy reef system. A lot of them are bacteria that you want in your reef system. Obviously in my case, there's macroalgae, so I can't just stop dosing nitrates and phosphates and other fertilizers, because that will mean my macroalgae will die and then there'll be nothing to outcompete the hair algae at all. But on a more general reef tank, you don't want your nitrates and phosphates to be at 0, because those bacteria which make up your healthy reef system will die as well as a lot of corals. They will die as well if there's no nitrates and phosphates. So keep your nitrates and phosphates at a detectable level. I'm not saying dump loads of these things into your tank to make it go through the roof. There needs to be some in your system for your entire system to function and also mature. And tank maturation is a big deal. A lot of the time hair algae will just go away on its own when your system matures. And a lot of people will get to this point where it's looking absolutely disgusting and completely panic, thus causing their system to fail. You have to let your system do what it's got to do. Now it looks horrible, I hate it, I'm not happy with it, but the worst thing for me to do in this situation would be to take this tank apart, scrub all these rocks, put peroxide on them, and so on and so forth, which is what people do. And then you get stuck in this never-ending cycle of immaturity within your system. This tank has to go through this period. Okay, I didn't help it by doing my poor maintenance. That probably has put me back a few months. But now I'm on top of that, this should eventually go away on its own. Now, one thing I have done, I've added more cleanup crew. If you can see here, you need to balance your cleanup crew as well. Obviously, snails that eat algae are going to help to get rid of your algae. This is horrific, isn't it? You know, I'm not proud of it, but there it is. That's the reality when things go wrong. Also, I've got tons of hermit crabs in here. So hermits are doing a reasonable job. You can see he's grazing on it. But what they won't do is get rid of this long hair algae. So we have to help them out a little bit. So let me show you another thing that you can do to get rid of your hair algae. Now, it's a lot of work and it's a daily job, but you need to siphon hair algae out. This is a lot of the time not even attached to the macroalgae or the rockwork that it's growing on, and all of this can be siphoned. You can see it's in the water column. That needs to be removed, and the more you remove, the less it's going to grow, because all of these little hairs are essentially able to spread around and transmit themselves throughout your system. So the more you remove, the better it will be. But this also shows me that I'm on the right track, because this hair algae is so weak that it can't even attach itself properly to surfaces. And when it gets to this point where it's just easily brushed away, you know that you're on the right path and the hair algae is starting to die away, and it's eventually going to just go away. But we help it along by siphoning. Another thing I'm doing is actually I'm trying to give the hair algae somewhere to live. Now that sounds strange, doesn't it? But it's kind of the basis of a refugium in a way. I have this light on this sump all the time, full brightness, 24/7, and I've got live rock in here. I'm just letting hair algae grow. Now the idea is the hair algae will grow in here and hopefully won't grow so much in here. It sounds bizarre, but it does work. You would think that hair algae will just distribute itself equally amongst your system, you know, regardless of where the light source is, but it seems to work. If you have a refugium, you can put a light on it with some rock in there and just grow your own hair algae. And for some reason, that is a method I've used a lot of times, and it's definitely helped to reduce the hair algae in the rest of the system. I guess it's a very similar system to the more traditional algae scrubber. So there we have it. There's the current update of all of my fish tanks. They're covered in hair algae, but key point is we've identified why we've had the hair algae outbreak, and we've taken steps to sort the problem out. And we've also had confirmation that the steps are working by the fact that the hair algae is not very strong anymore, not very vibrant green, and is starting to recede. So we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's simply by doing that, a lot of the time in your tank you can help get rid of your hair algae as well. What you don't want to do is overreact to it and completely destroy your system. A reef system is a very balanced thing, and it's very precarious as well. If you do one thing wrong, like don't do water changes, even one water change missing can create a bit of a chain reaction down the line, as you've seen from my tanks. So stability, don't overreact, give it time, do regular maintenance, and you shouldn't actually have hair algae, but if you do, it will eventually just disappear on its own. So I hope this has been useful. You know, obviously things happen in the reef world. A lot of people, when they put a YouTube video on of their reef tank, it's the most pristine, beautiful thing you've ever seen. But I'd say the majority of fish keepers, that's not a reality all the time, is it? You have algae outbreaks, you have issues, you have deaths, and so on and so forth. And this is the reality of fish keeping. So, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like and also subscribe to my channel. Once again, thank you for watching and happy fish keeping.